Hi all, in today's video we will be covering YAML file which is used for Kubernetes. Along with that we will deploy a sample pod, the replica set and a deployment. And also we will have some quick introduction about the namespaces. So let's get started. So about the YAML file. So whatever is being deployed generally in Kubernetes, it's through the inputs of a YAML file, which is specific for the Kubernetes. So you create a YAML file in an editor. Here I'm using one of the editors for the YAML file creation, and we will see a sample YAML file for pod creation. So if you see, this is the sample YAML file. The extension can be YML or YAML, and it contains basically four main sections. Uh, this one is your API version, and this depends upon the kind. Suppose for pod it's v1, then there are other API versions, apps hyphen / v1 and such kind of things. Then we have a kind which reflects what is this particular file about, whether it's a pod, whether it's a deployment, whether it's a replica set, whether it's a service, and some and other things. This section. And there is one metadata where you define the name of a particular pod and you specify the labels. Labels are basically used in identification of and for filtering along with the selectors. We will see to it in replica set and the deployments. Then there is this one is the most important, which is the specification. Here you specify what are the specifications of a particular kind. That is, for pod we specify what's the image of the application it would be picking up from Docker Hub. Here it's picking up from Docker Hub public registry, and also we specified what would be the name of the container uh, that would be used. This is the sample file. So these are the four main sections: API version, kind, metadata, and specifications. Now whatever is being deployed, it goes into the default namespace. So default namespace, we can refer to it or the namespace, we can refer to it as a house. Whatever stays in that, we use it for the isolation. We will discuss about that in the future upcoming videos, but not in this one. So this is for deployment of one of the pod. Okay, so let's get started and see how we create a pod in the Kubernetes. So we are using an Azure Kubernetes services which has 3 nodes, worker nodes, so we have access to those only. So let's get started. So this is the portal, the Cloud Shell. So here I have a folder named pods. I have copied the file, this one. And before we do that, how we create it, we use a file, we use create-f command for creating the pod. But before that, let's see the content of the file. So these are exactly the same, and we will see that do we have any existing pods running in the namespace, default namespace. We will see what are the total namespaces currently. So we have the one default one, then there are three system, the cube ones, which are deployed automatically when we deploy the AKS solution, and there is the test NS which I created. This is another namespace in which we would be deploying our replica set. So let's get started. Let kubectl create -f then the name of the YAML file. So this is the syntax that we use, this one. But before we do that, let's make sure that whether we are running any pod or not. So you see that nothing is being in the default namespace, and if we see in the all namespaces, so we could see all these are the system things which we have set up during the deployment of AKS, as you have seen in our last videos. So I will just clear it, and then we will create pod YAML. So it did create this particular test app container, the pod, which is the smallest unit, and it contains an image of Nginx, which is front end. So let's see. So it displays the pods in the default namespace. If we need to see some details, it will just show how it is, where it is present, and also, so this is about the pod creation. Now let's take an example, like, so this is simple pod. Generally we don't use that. Now what we will talk about the replica sets. Now why do we need a replica set? We need a replica set. Suppose a user is using this particular application, which is a web app, and using Nginx image, and this particular app crashes, then user will lose access to the application. So in order to have a high availability and to use the applications, uh, there should be a mechanism set so that the pod recreates when replica set or the Kubernetes monitors the pod, running pod, that if it crashes, then and automatically another copy of that pod is created so that the service or the app users are not affected, and they are able to use the applications. So for that perspective, we use the replication set, which contains the copies of the pods. So this is a sample replica set file. If you see, we have the 4 main sections as we discussed in the pods, and if you see in here, it's apps v1. So this particular API version where it is present, it's under v1 under apps, and the kind is replica set. And if we see the kind in pod, I will just copy it so that we can compare the two. So if you see the comparison here, right? So API version is apps v1, here is here is v1. So the kind, so you can just check out what version it is, and or I will also paste the same in the particular link for the video. So here is the replica set, here is the pod, the kind for both of them. Metadata, it's a thing where you define the name of the particular kind, and also you define the labels. Labels are basically used to identify what kind of application it is. Okay, so here if you see on the left hand side, we have metadata where we have specified name. Only difference that you will find here is that other than labels, we also have one more property, which is namespace. So by default, when you created the pod, it went into the default namespace in here. There is no namespace listed over here, but here we have a namespace test ns, and whatever you deploy goes into that. Then here we have defined 2 labels. You can define n number of labels under this particular metadata field, and this is a this is a particular array that you use. Then we come into the specs section. So under section, we have defined another property, which is replicas, where we identify how many number of copies of the pods will be running, how many pods will be running when we deploy this replica set. And after that, we use another uh, field under specs, which is template. And here we pick up everything from here, this one, and move it here, this one. So it goes in here, this particular section. If you see this particular content, if you see this one, so this goes here. Okay. So it's a subset of a replica set, where you define, okay, how many number of pods would be running and which image it would be picking up. Now the another thing which is being used in replica set is a selector field. In selector, we are using match labels, which is basically used to identify the pods on the basis of the label. So here we are using a label name test-app, and if you see the thing, we have defined two labels, test-app and the type and the front end. And similarly, under labels, we have for the pods is the same. And in order to match the labels, that means when replica set identifies which particular pods are related to this replica set and which pods to identify, so that an application crashes, it creates a particular amount of suppose there are four replicas, which would be four copies which would be created, and if one goes bad, it will identify automatically on the particular nodes in the Kubernetes cluster how many such copies are running. If there are three running, it will automatically deploy the fourth one. So let's get started, and let's try to deploy one of the replica set. So we have this particular file created, right? Now, before we do that, I would like to delete this pod which we created in the demo for the pod. So this we have deleted. Now, whatever we would be deploying here, it will go into the test ns namespace that we saw uh, in the previous few commands. So this one, it will go in here, this one, this namespace. Anyways, so ls, and then we see the so we go in here and we see the content of the file. So we have the same thing. So let's create a pod, replica set, using inputs from the YAML file. So it gives an error that it's invalid. So let me correct it, and then we will come back. Okay guys, I'm back. So we will just see what mistake did we commit. So this was the file on which we got an error, okay, on the replica set. So I created another one, the rsconfig.yaml on the left hand side. You could see the difference. The difference was nothing much, it was into the indentation. And I just corrected it because in YAML spaces do matter. If something is not correct, then it's gonna throw an error. So we have copied this particular file onto, if you see on the left file, we have used this, we have changed few names, and we have used the match label as only one type, which is the type front end, and type front end here. Container image is nginx, and the name of the containers is nginx, and it will be deployed into the test ns namespace, and the name of the replica set would be web. So let's see and deploy it. So this is the file that I copied. So if we go here, cat, this is the file you could see. Now let's create. So you could also use this command replica set as an rs hyphen name hyphen n, then the namespace test ns, in which we would be deploying. There is nothing in it, so we'll go here and create it and input this file. So it says it's created, so let's see what it says. So there is nothing in default namespace, then I have to specify the namespace here. So if you see there, it shows four things: the name of the replica set, the desired uh, replicas, and the current which are run, and the ready is which are currently ready and run. So how do we see the pause? Actually, you could see using a single command, get all hyphen n test ns. So if you see, it will show you whatever is there in the test namespace, it will show you. Now if you see, so it has created four pods with the web as the initials. If you see in here, it will be using web, the replica name, and then it will add anything to some numbers to it and show create it. So if you see this one, now this is one aspect. Now let's do this and let's try to kill one of the pod. It says the pod deleted, but we will again see the another pod should be created of its own. If you see, it has created another pod of its own because the set did identify the things, and it that there should be four replicas, and it created it of its own. Now suppose there is a bit of more load on the there are more number of users which have come up, and there is a requirement to increase the number of pods in the replica set by few numbers, say maybe from 4 to 5 or say 4 to 6. So how do we do that? Generally, the best practice is to update the YAML file and then run. Then you use the replace switch with the YAML. So let's make some changes into the file. me go ahead and see that 6. So we have 6 now. So it will show you on which nodes it is running. Currently all these are running onto the same node. They are running on different nodes, like if you see node 1, 2 and 3. So it's distributed. So now in order to reapply, in order to make sure that we have the 6 number of pods are running, and whatever we have fed into the replica set file, the replica configuration YAML file, we need to run the command place -f. So it has replaced. Now if I go in and again run the same command, it will, you can see that there are 6 pods which are running. Right, so this is the one way. There is also another command that you could use, and which is the scale option. You can use it as a scale option. So this is about the replica sets. Now let's go ahead and remove the replica set. Okay, and you use this command kubectl delete, then replica set, then the name of the replica set, then the namespace if it's not in the default domain space. It will also delete the pods, and it will also delete anything associated with it. So it says deleted. Now if I say, it says it's terminating all the pods. So once it's now it's 1, and if you see, it's all gone, and there is no namespace, there is no replica set, nothing in it. Now this we have discussed about replica sets and the pods. Now let's discuss about the deployments. What is a deployment? Now if you are setting up any particular solution, right, you need to have end-to-end in it. So what you do is you create a deployment configuration file in which you specify your replica set, the pods, and also you can use it for updating it as per the if the particular image in the registry gets updated. And so in that case you define the deployment. So it's an end-to-end thing. In the layman terms, we can say that the deployment, the replica set and the pods and other stuff are subset of deployment. So if I say this, and let me open MS Paint where it would be better for me to explain. So if I say this, right, so if we see that the deployment has replica set, and in replica set there are multiple pods, pod 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let's see how the YAML file for the deployment looks like and what we can do uh, for the same. So let me go through the same replica set file, or I will create a copy of this file. I replace this file actually. So here everything is same, but what I do is here I will change it as from replica set the kind to deployment. API version remains same, and I will use it into the same namespace. Make I will make the replicas as 3. Let's see if we can add something more to it. And there was one more file, don't see much into it, but you can Google around. There are many things, so you can have a particular deployment and you can have multiple containers in it if you want to specify it, such as helper containers. So let's go ahead, and everything else is same. There is not much of a difference. This is just for testing that we are doing. So it says that the deployment is created. So in the test namespace, so if you see, it will show you additional entry of deployment. If you see the deployment web and the replica sets. Now in order to see that, get rs minus n test s. Let's say it will show you the replica set with the name, and it shows that there are 3 copies of it. You need to see the pods, get pods hyphen if you are doing it single, if you are checking it in a single way. These are 3 pods, and similarly deployment minus n test s. So it will just show you like what the deployment is running and what it has. If you need to see some more details, right, and if you need to see some more option, describe deployment, it will show you the exact details.